What's up guys, it's your boy Goblins, and today we're talking about Dark Souls 3, and in particular, the I Am a Sage build guide. So the idea behind this build was to make a build that really encapsulated everything for casting all together. I wanted to do a build that could literally cast everything at all times, no matter what. So I figured what better way to do this other than use the Crystal Chime and the White Hair Talisman. Now you guys know I'm not a huge fan of the White Hair Talisman, but I really wanted to switch it up for this video because I've used Pyromancer Flame for 2 videos in a row, which was I'm a Hexer and I'm a Pyromancer. So I figured it was time to switch it up, and the White Hair Talisman does exactly that, but it's not that great. Just remember that the White Hair Tally isn't all that great, but we'll get into that. A lot of it also has to do with the fact that a lot of people wanted me to do a build with White Hair Talisman, so I figured what better time than now. So let's talk a little bit about the stats. I'm soul level 125 in New Game +2. I've got Vigor at 25, a 2-minute 40, Endurance at 15, Vitality at 10, Strength at 12, Dexterity 15, Intelligence 45, Faith 45, and Luck at 7. So unlike 11 Vigor, I actually got to put some points into Vigor, which was 25 Vigor, so I was pretty stoked on that. I know everyone hates when I have low Vigor, so like 25 Vigor for me is acceptable. If you don't think that's the case, then, well, you know, whatever. I think as long as you have 15 Vigor, it's always a good time. As long as you have 15 Vigor, anything upwards beyond that is just a bonus. It's just a bonus. It's a cherry on top. Contrary to popular belief, you can play the game like that. You can play the game in unique ways. You don't have to do a 40-40 quality build. Just saying. I'm just saying. My 2 minutes at 40 because I like to have a nice variety of spells. I've mentioned this before in past videos. Having a 2-minute 40 gives you the max FP because the FP bar actually soft caps at 40, and also gives you the max amount of slots that would be worth having around at 40 as well. And personally, I like having that versatility with spells. My endurance is at 15, and I actually never really put points into endurance before, but it is helpful for the stamina. It's always nice to have that extra bit of stamina, and the points just look better there. Strength's at 12 because realistically you're not going to have to carry around anything. Dexterity is at 15 because the soft cap for virtual dexterity for casting is at dexterity 15. If you use that plus the Sage Ring, that'll get you the virtual dexterity cap in Dark Souls 3. Otherwise, in order to fast cast spells, you're gonna have your dexterity at like dexterity 40 or 50 or something like that. So if you want to fast cast spells with very low stat investment, then the Sage's Ring is made for you. The Sage's Ring is almost an essential in every type of casting build that's at level 125. Unless you have some sort of Dex hybrid build, you could probably play around with that a little bit, but realistically the Sage Ring is worn by almost every single caster. And if you have the Sage's Ring +1, I believe you can go 10 dexterity and have the soft cap for virtual dex with Sage's Ring +1. But otherwise, you're going to be going 15 dexterity and the regular Sage Ring to get max casting speed. And my intelligence and faith are at 45-45. So I did this because the Crystal Chime soft caps at 45-45 for intelligence and faith, and it scales off both stats. And the White Hair Talisman also scales off intelligence and faith, but it only scales offensive miracles purely off faith. And it's also bugged because the White Hair Talisman only accounts for intelligence scaling if it's at the exact same amount of stat points as faith. So if you have, for example, 43-45 faith, so if you have, for example, 43-45 intelligence faith, you're actually going to be only scaling your pyromancies off of just faith, and that's not cool. That's not good. So of course, to get optimal damage, you're going to have them both at 45. And luck is at 7 because you're not going to use luck for anything in this build, other than if you're like really trying to hunt for items. Gotta get that item discovery up, but that's only if. And now let's talk about the gear I chose for this build. So once again, I got Crystal Chime because I can cast both miracles and sorceries, and scales off intelligence and faith, and actually does pretty comparable damage to what potentially cap damage can be with sorceries as is. Really good for a dual catalyst. It really is awesome for a dual catalyst, actually. If you're going to use any dual catalyst, Crystal Chime, it's got it. It's got everything you need. Then there's the White Hair Talisman, which once again isn't all that great when you think about it, and the only reason I used it is stylistically for Fashion Souls, and of course you don't really see it around. I would recommend you use a Pyromancer Flame for this build instead of the White Hair Talisman, because the Crystal Chime of course already casts sorceries and miracles. You're not going to need to cast miracles with this here, so you can just use this one hand for sorceries. It does cast Combustion, which can actually be very helpful if you plan on having Combustion as the weapon art. Can be very helpful. And use it. Like, honestly, might as well use Combustion when it's there, you know? Like, you might as well. And for the aesthetics, we've got Old Sage's Blindfold, Sorcerer Robe, Sorcerer Gloves, and Leonhard's Trousers. So the concept, let me tell you about the concept behind this one, okay? So it's like an old sage. He looks super experienced. He like kicks the shit out of everything. He's like the master of all elements. So I'm like, what would a sage look like? Like a raggedy old badass sage. And it would look like this guy. That or like the obvious, which would have been like Big Hat Logan, for example, with like the Sage's hat and all that. But I was like, nah, this is cool. This is cool. He looks like aged master of all elements. He looks like he could just fuck shit up all the time with just his hands. That's all he needs is just his hands. But realistically, he's holding on to chimes and everything. But nobody needs to know that. That's our little secret. That could be our thing, you know. And that's why it looks cool too, because you're just kind of like using your fists to like cast things. This is what it looks like sometimes, you know. It's just like boom. It just looks like the hand, and it's super cool. And I think I like it a lot, at least. And he's like got these big fat ass robes on, covering all his badassery in his old age, and he's got that sage's blindfold because he don't need no vision because he just casts everything, and he's a badass. Like I said, he's got it going on. And then there's the ring synergy, which isn't really that great for this build considering you're using all 3 spell schools in the game, which makes it quite tough. The first ring I've got is Bellowing Dragoncrest Ring, which greatly boosts sorceries, Witch's Ring, which greatly boosts pyromancies, and Ring of the Sun's Firstborn, which greatly boosts miracles, to top off with the Sage Ring +1. So of course, as I've already mentioned, Sage Ring is essential for getting that virtual dex up for casting, and all the other ones are to of course maximize damage wherever you can if you are using all 3 schools. That's what makes this build. This build uses all 3 types of spells because he's like the master of all elements, and if you really want to switch it up, you could throw like Black Serpent in there and bait people with like Black Serpent into Soul Spear, stuff like that. And so you need these rings. You need these rings to cast everything and be an everything caster if you want to deal any type of good damage. So like even when my Sacred Flames would hit and it didn't completely kill off my opponent, it was kind of like, ah man, but still felt good. I did it. It was cool. Now let's talk about the spells. So I'm only going to go over the spells that I actually used in the video in itself. It's kind of just to go over why I picked the spells that I did and explain why I think the spells that I have on right now are the best spells to be using in PvP and all that stuff. And we're just gonna test it on my favorite Goonie. This guy's my favorite testing dude always. So we'll start with the Fair and Flash Swords. The Fair and Flash Sword is fairly quick, good for those really quick last hits and all that stuff, and it does stun lock enemies when you are slashing them, except for this dude because he gets poised, but we don't in the game, so that's cool. But generally when you're in PvP and you're slashing with a Fair and Flash Sword, it'll hit them fairly well, and on top of that, it does stun lock them, so it's quite the good sorcery to have. Once again, really helpful for last hits and for anti-aggression as well. Really keeps anything aggressive away from you, and that's also very important in playing any type of caster. So then we've got the Sunlight Spear, which is also another personal favorite of mine. Deals extra damage when you're close range, like pretty much kissing someone. It essentially summons down like another Thunderbolt when you're casting it. But if you're hitting from far away, it's just the single one Sunlight Spear. This will probably kill him, so I'm kind of just trying to explain before I go for it. But I'm going to get in close here, and you guys will see that extra bolt of lightning kind of come off the top of the Sunlight Spear, and that actually deals additional damage. So it's good because it's fast, it's quick, it'll hit your opponent and can deal extra damage, or not extra damage depending on where your opponent is, of course. But as you can see, so it's just regular Sunlight Spear, and then we're going to get in here and do like a close-up Sunlight Spear. So as long as he stops swinging his thing around, but you couldn't really see it there. I don't think I got it off there, but when you're in PvP and you hit someone with a Sunlight Spear, you'll see that extra spear come down from above, and it is very helpful to do that extra bit of damage. It's good for catching people out of rolls. That's what I mostly use it for, and dealing damage altogether. Then we've got Soul Spear, which penetrates enemies, which is really good for PvE. Not so much in PvP, it's just you're going to use it mostly for damage at a range as well. You can catch people out of rolls with Soul Spear, and that's what you're also going to be doing it for mostly, is catching people out of rolls. Does do a fair amount of damage, and it hits hard, looks intimidating, good for anti-aggression like I said before, and you can get these off on people. People will get hit by Soul Spears. It does happen, it's not absurd. You just gotta get them off guard pretty much, but it is a heavy damage dealer and quite the essential for your utility belt. It goes hand in hand with Sunlight Spear because you're not going to be constantly spamming Sunlight Spears. You'll probably want to have kind of a mix up on that as well. So Soul Spear is kind of like one of my favorites for ranged sorceries as well. And now we've got the Lightning Stake. Oh man, once again, massive anti-aggression. Will stagger your opponents and push them away, which is great as well. So I really like the Lightning Stake as well. Deals a fair amount of damage. Like I said, pushes your opponents away, looks super scary. And that's really what it is, again, is an anti-aggression tool. So lots of really good anti-aggression versatility with this build and all that stuff, which is really nice as well. And it hits heavier the closer you are to your opponent, which is very important. So if you load it up when they're running at you or anything like that, or if you run up to them and use Lightning Stake, it can deal some pretty hefty damage and gets that stagger off on them, so you can maybe throw in like a Sacred Flame or like a Fair and Flash Sword, or catch them off guard with a Sunlight Spear or Soul Spear, any of that good stuff. So anything that does staggering or stun lock is very helpful for getting those extra shots in as well. So unlike the Cleric, you had the Hyper Armor on the Cleric with the Sunlight Tally, With this, you don't have that same hyper armor, but if you can get those shots in, you know, at a decent rate, at a decent time, and not get hit by things, then that's good as well. Also, only costs 1 attunement slot, and that is new. It used to actually cost 2 attunement slots for this spell, and now it doesn't. And that's great. That's awesome. Now, I actually saved the Pyromancers that I used for last just because I want to talk about damage really quick and why I think the White Hair Tally won't do as much damage as like a Pyromancy Flame. And if you guys are running this build, please use a Pyromancy Flame. I just use it for the sake of, once again, just switching it up. It's just for fashion's sake. So we're going to throw that Pyromancy Flame on real quick just to show you the damage difference. So I'm going to hit this dude with a Sacred Flame from the White Hair Tally, and you guys will see that it won't deal as much damage as I'd like it to. And we're just going to go ahead and do that real quick. This is with the White Hair Talisman, keep in mind as well. So let's get that off real quick. And here we go. So White Hair Tally deals 1,000 damage on this guy. So that's pretty cool. Generally in PvP, depending on someone's fire resistance, it's going to do less or more damage. As you guys saw in my video, I was dealing like, for example, 700 damage to some people. Other people I was dealing like 200 damage, if even that, because they had high fire resist. So it all really depends on who you're dueling as well, what armor set they have on. But here's the Pyromancy Flame in comparison with Sacred Flame. It'll probably deal a significant amount of more damage, so 1125. So it's not anything too crazy, but I can promise you'll notice it more in PvP using Sacred Flame. It does deal a lot more damage in PvP in comparison to this. I love Sacred Flame though. It's a thing that I will forever have on my loadout because it just looks cool and it's so satisfying. Sacred Flame is probably the most satisfying spell ever in the entirety of Dark Souls, except for maybe Forbidden Sun. It's my favorite thing, and like when people get hit by Sacred Flame, they're like, oh damn, that just happened. And it's for real, man. I love the spell so much. It's my favorite spell for sure. You can once again catch people out of their rolls. Aggressive builds, load it up right as they're about to hit you when they're running at you, and you'll most likely snag them off guard because you have like a slight couple seconds of hyper armor, which you can drag them in with Sacred Flame. Very important stuff, and is actually quite useful to know. So now Fire Whip is another favorite of mine. It stun locks opponents and gets them reeled in. Once you hit at least one shot of Fire Whip at them, people will honestly usually get stun locked and take all the damage from Fire Whip. Very good anti-aggression. Has fantastic tracking on it generally. I think they might have actually patched the tracking from a couple patches ago, which I don't think many people noticed, but I feel like it might have gotten patched. Because this used to track like a full 180 degrees like it did in Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 2. I think they may have patched that. I think it only shoots the Fire Whip in front of you now, and probably doesn't catch many people within the Fire Whip itself. So I'm just going to go ahead and use that really quick. So here's the White Hair Talisman damage. So deal a total of 648, which is nice. As you can see, the opponent there got staggered, which is nice as well. And same idea there, but instead he had like, he was going for it. He was going in. He was about to do it. But right here, for example, 637. So comparable damage, but once again, you will deal more damage using a regular Pyromancy Flame. But beyond that, the Fire Whip is awesome because once again, it stun locks, staggers, and you can follow it up with something else as well. People usually get pretty scared from Fire Whip too because they're like, oh god, I'm stun locked. What's going to happen? And yeah, it's a real threat. I love Fire Whip. It's like the most underused pyromancy in PvP, but it is so good. It's so helpful to use. Even good for last hits because just that little bit of damage when you poke someone, it's great. It's fantastic. And alternatively, you can use something like Black Serpent here, which a lot of people will use, of course. So you use the Black Serpent because it has great tracking, tracks right to your opponent, usually staggers them as well, and you can bait them into a Soul Spear. So you go Black Serpent here, and then you just cast that Soul Spear immediately after. Obviously, this guy's got like some sort of hyper armor, but he's my favorite guy to test on, but you get the idea. When you're using that in PvP, it's really good. Black Serpent plus Sunlight Spear or Black Serpent plus Soul Spear or something like that is very awesome and very helpful to be using because you'll instantly track into your opponents. It's awesome. It just does its thing. It just follows your opponents and deals damage. Black Serpent used to suck. Back in my day, Black Serpent was the worst Dark Pyromancy, but now it's one of the best. Purely for the tracking, people are afraid of it, and you can bait super hard into anything like a Fireball, Soul Spear, Sunlight Spear, any of that stuff. People will get hit after they're done rolling out of Black Serpent, which is awesome. And that's all the spells I've used for this build. If you guys are interested in checking out any other spells or have any questions about any other spells, please check out the other build guides. I've literally gone over every single spell in the entirety of Dark Souls 3. You guys can find anything you're looking for or wondering about within those videos in themselves for build guides for sorcery, hexes / dark magic, pyromancies, miracles. All that stuff can be found in its specific build guide. So this Cleric, Pyromancer, Sorcerer, and Hexer. You can find it all within those build guide videos. Now there's of course a couple of things I'd like to mention about this build. I usually do a couple kind of tips before I leave off on every single build guide video. The first one I want to mention is be sure to use combustion on your White Hair Talisman. It's there for a reason, and that's why you have it in your offhand, is so you can actually use combustion. You can have the Crystal Chime in your offhand as well if you want the regenerating health, but the regenerating health isn't even that great, and if you ever decide to swap it out on your character on the go, it's going to remove that buff completely, which is why I like having White Hair Talisman in my offhand, because I know it'll actually do something if I ever need to get like a last hit or anything, or catch people off guard, because not many people know that White Hair Tally and Pyromancer Flame have that combustion ability. People forget about it very often, which is nice. Be sure to be the aggressor and have lots of anti-aggression. That's why I chose the spells that I chose, because you can take on katanas, dark blades, onokiri, ubadachi, spears, halberds. You can take on anything with this build. It's just a matter of picking the tools that you need to pick when you're fighting a certain person. When you push away the aggressive builds, that's when they're like, oh fuck, how do I kill this guy if he's super anti-aggressive? And then following it up by being aggressive with like lightning stake, sacred flame, fair and flash sword, and so on and so forth. Because usually I'll run right at people with lightning stake just for the sake of scaring the shit out of them. I'll go get right in their faces about it. And they're like, oh man, this guy is for real. This guy's mad. Suddenly, you become the aggressor. Suddenly, you become the aggressive build that everyone's terrified of. And suddenly, you win because you see the panic rolls come out. Your enemy's trying to read you and they can't read you while they're constantly trying to roll away and avoid attacks and all that. And that's why this build is awesome. And to follow up with that, the last thing I always say is play smart and time everything. It's very important as a caster of any type to play extremely smart and know when to hit your enemies. Sacred Flame, for example, when someone's running right at you, be sure to time it so that it's charged up and is about to hit your enemy as soon as they get in your face. You want to make sure that thing connects and stays there so you can get that couple seconds of hyper armor to bring them in for Sacred Flame and just absolutely demolish them. Lightning Stake is the same idea. Fair and Flash Sword you get to be super aggressive about. You can run out to them and slash them with it, but also make sure you're paying attention to your stamina when using the Flash Sword as well, because it is stamina draining. But it allows you to stun lock people and take a couple steps back and give yourself a breather. Sunlight Spear as well. Catch people out of their rolls, catch people as they're rolling. If you use Sunlight Spear up close, you get that extra spike of damage, which is also very helpful. Soul Spear, same idea, all that stuff as well. And I think I say this like every video, is just to play smart and time everything, because that's a lot of what Dark Souls 3 PvP is. Once you read your opponent, once you know what they're all about, what they're building and everything, that's when you can start saying, okay, here's what I'm going to do in this second, here's what I'm going to do in this instance, and here's what he's going to try and do after I use this, and so on and so forth. And that's why you see me flicking through spells quite quickly in this video, is because that's how I duel. That's how I know when to use certain things and what time is a good time to cast those spells and so on. And that's everything I have to talk about for today, guys. As I always say, drop a like for your boy Goblins, and I'll be back here with more Dark Souls content shortly. So take it easy, have a general good, and I'll see you guys in the next video, which will hopefully be the DLC video or the patch update, either or. I'm stoked on both of those. I'm so hyped. If it's DLC, oh man, that teaser on the fan page, oh my god, yeah! Take it easy, guys, have a general good, and I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out!